All right, so just real quick, 2 people still have to take the test or finish it, and maybe 3 people. 3 people. Somebody got a perfect score. The average is 34. If you line them up from lowest to highest, the middle score was 38. That's what median means. Mode is the one that was the most. So way to go, all of you who got 40. I put these scores all in already. It bothers me that I'm not being accurate. Okay, so we're going to talk about arrays, everybody. Stop working on the warm-up. Hands off the keyboard. Look up here, please. This is new material. It's not trivial. If you miss this, you will be lost, and it will destroy you. No, I don't want anyone to be destroyed, but you just want to pay attention. So the reason I did that post-test warm-up where I had you get, was it 3 test scores? Three numbers, and then 5 numbers into 5 variables, and then find their average. It's because it's easier to do something like that with an array. An array, well, let's look. Look, if you wanted to do 100 things, would you want to do that? N1, N2, N3, up to N90, and 100. That would be annoying, right? So an array is a fixed size sequential collection of elements of the same type. So they have to all be the same type. So if you're collecting double variables, you'd make a double array. If you're doing int variables, you'd have an int array. If you're doing strings, you'd do a string array, and so on. And you can store them all in one variable. So it looks like this. So if we were going to do 100 test scores, we could say, hey, the way you can read this out loud is int array named scores equals new int array with 100 elements. That's creating an array of 100 things. So imagine I'll show you in a second a way to visualize it. But the brackets here say we're making an array, and the new command forces it to be created, and then this number in here tells Java how many spots. And once you create it, you can't resize an array. So it's stuck at that size, yeah.
So it's kind of like Java's version of like a list in Python almost?
Yeah, except you're creating all the spots ahead of time and you can't add spots. Yeah, there's something we're going to do next, which is more like a Python list. But so we access individual elements in an array using numbers, index numbers. And the first element, it's like a string. The first element is 0, and the last element is the length minus 1. In my example, it's 99. So if you try to use an index that's out of bounds, you get an array index out of bounds exception error. Looks like this. So the length, we can find out how long an array is. You just ask it using the dot length property. So I want to be really clear. The length for an array has no parentheses after it. It's not a method. Methods have the parentheses. This is a property, and you just have to memorize this. Arrays have a dot length property. Strings, you're calling a dot length method, so there's parentheses after it. I know it can be confusing, but listen, this command sets that last element to be 7, even if we don't know how many elements there are. This scores array could have 1,000 elements. We don't know. However many it has, we do a -1 on that, and that's the last one, the last little box. So I'm just reiterating this. Yes, if nums.length -1 is equal to 0, blah, blah, blah. No, nums.length with parentheses. It won't compile. It won't run. It'll be pretty quickly. The feedback will be back to you pretty quick. So we use .length with parentheses for strings because they have a method that's called length, and methods always have parentheses at the end. And arrays are all different types, and they don't have methods. Like integers don't have methods. You can't small I integer. There's no dot method anything. So maybe that'll help you remember. You just have to memorize this. Okay, printing. You would think you could just say print, but you can't. If I just printed this scores array I've been working with here, you just get something like this weird code. So instead, we make a little for loop, and I'll show you. This little for loop will print all the items in the array, all on one line, as a matter of fact. So we do a for loop, int I equals 0, And as long as I is less than the length of scores, we keep going up and we print scores, square bracket I. And you could say scores at I is a way to say that out loud. And then we're printing this blank line at the end just because all those other scores were just going onto one line. And then it's good form to put a blank line at the end in case you print something else. So don't worry, you'll get to practice this, or do worry. By default, int and double array values are initialized to 0. So if you create an int array of 10 elements and then you try to print element 0, it'll just print 0. Any of the elements are 0. If you create a double array and print one of them, it'll be 0. If you make a Boolean array, all the elements are initialized to false. And we have two ways of creating an array. The first way is the way I just showed you, where you create it and they all have their default values. The other way is using something called an array initializer, and that's within curly brackets. Just list the things you want to be in the array. So if I'm going to make an integer array called nums, it has these 5 numbers. I just can write this line and it creates it. And so this is another way to visualize what's going on in an array, like little boxes. If you've used Google Sheets or the program Excel, it's very similar, except the first column is 0. So if I made this call, int nums equals 4, 3, 21, 7, 8, then I would get this, in memory. And if I did this call, system.out.println nums.length, I would get 5, because there are 5 elements. It's like a string. How long is the string? How many letters are there? Or how many, spaces count in that, obviously. But the last element is 1 less than the length. And then if I said, hey, I want to print nums at 4, I would get an 8, because that's what's at slot 4. Questions? Here are array initializers for a double array and a Boolean array, just so you could see what I'm talking about. I mean, I showed you one for an int, but it's just you say double array and then a name equals, and then you have curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, you have a collection of those things. Whether it's integers, doubles, Booleans. In a second, I'll show you strings, because you can do it with strings as well. And then running this code, I was like, what was I trying to do here?
You just printed out true or false.
But it's wrong.
No, you changed the Boolean status that you'd already created. You changed the first one to true, and then you printed it.
Oh, okay, good. I wasn't changing them all. I was like, if I change them all to true, then why aren't they all true? Okay, so here I created this one with false, true, true, false. And then I just changed the first one to true, just to remind you that's how you do it. And then I printed the whole array. You have to do a for loop to print an array. And now it prints true, 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 false, because it was false, true, true, false. Thanks for helping me. We can also make and use arrays for strings and any reference data. Like we can make frog arrays, and you will today. Here's an example with an array initializer. String array called pets is equal to cat, dog, chicken. And then if I said, hey, print pets at 2, it'll print chicken, because remember it's 0, 1, 2. And we can access each element in array and change them. Look at this. I'm changing all the pets to be uppercase. So I made a for loop from 0 to less than pets.length. Pets I equals pets I dot to uppercase. That makes each element uppercase. So you can go through an array and do something to each one. You could check how long they are. You could, if they were numbers, you could add numbers and change them. Yeah.
Oh, you have a variable in an array and change it outside of the array.
Yeah. Yeah, if you said pets 2 equals my favorite pet, and then my favorite pet was defined somewhere else, and you changed my favorite pet, then pets 2 would continue to represent your favorite pet. Here's another example of me printing the last element in the array without knowing how long it was. I want to print pets at, I'm saying at because of the square brackets. And then I do pets.length -1, which means give me the last one. And in this case, it would print chicken uppercase because this code changed them all to be uppercase. Here's a frog array. I made an array of 5 frogs. Frog array called pond equals new frog array with 5 elements. And just so you know, when we create an array of strings or any other class that's not a primitive, all the elements are null by default. And it's not the word null in quotes, it's the word null. Null is a keyword like true and false. So I put it in quotes there just, I don't know, because I was trying to say, look what it prints. But I think it'd be better if I took the quotes off so you didn't think, oh, it's printing the word null. And it's a word, because it's not like a word like hello or good morning. It's a keyword. So when you create an array of strings or frogs, or name any of the classes that we wrote in Unit 5, like the knife or the chicken or any, if you create an array of those, they're all null. And then if you want to put a frog in a spot, you have to literally put it in that spot. So I'll show you right here. So if I made this call, frog array pond equals new 5 element frog array, they're all null. And then here, look, I said pond at 3 equals new frog. That puts a frog in here, and that frog is named pond at 3. So you can refer to that frog anytime you want by saying pond with a 3, and you can hop it. I would hope I show you. Yep, I'm showing you how to hop. Pond at 3 dot hop 12. And then if I printed pond at 3, it would print the frog just like it always does, can. We can initialize all the elements in an object array like this. So I make a for loop from I 0 to less than the length, and I say pond I equals new frog. That will put a frog in each spot. That's different from having it be null in each spot. You can't hop a null. Before I did this, you can't say pond at 0 dot hop. It would say something like you're referencing a null object or a null pointer error. I don't know. Try it and tell me what it says. Walker?
Can you just like normally initialize a frog object into an array, like you would like putting 2 as an int into an array? Like if I had a frog named like Jerry.
Oh, you could put Jerry in spot 3, yeah.
Okay, cool. And then you would refer to that object. Can I refer to it both as Jerry and as
Yeah.
Frog, not Frog?
Yeah, they're pointing to the same thing if you do that. Yeah.
Making that array would have to be internet, right? Because frogs are counted in like it's.
Making which array would have to be in an array?
Have an array you want to put a frog into it as a different variable than like Jerry.
No, it'd have to be a frog array.
That'd be frog array.
Yeah, not an int array, because int array can only hold integers. Yeah, so if you want to hold frogs, so for people watching this at home, hi Julian. Who else is absent? Nobody. Stranger who I don't know. What are you doing watching my videos? I hope they help. Okay. Yeah. If you had a frog outside of this code that you wanted to store in the array, go ahead and do it. Just say pond 2 equals Jerry the frog. And then if you hop Jerry the frog outside of the array, Jerry's hopping. If you hop him from inside the array, Jerry's hopping. They're pointing to the same object.
You don't have to say frog, Jerry equals new frog. You just say frog.
Well, I'm assuming we created Jerry somewhere else. Yeah, this only works if you said frog Jerry equals new frog, and then you had your high hopes on Jerry hopping the most, and you wanted to put Jerry in the lineup, and then we're going to hop them all again and see if Jerry wins. Okay, in summary, then we're going to practice. Arrays are collections of related data, whether it's primitive or reference. We refer to the collection using a single name. Each specific array can only hold one type of data, so you're not going to have an array that has doubles and ints and frogs. We access individual elements using square brackets and index values. The first index is 0. The last is array.length minus 1. And if you try to go out of bounds, whether with a negative number or a number bigger than the length minus 1, you get index out of bounds error, so that you can look when you get an error like, oh, shoot, I was trying to go too far. The size of an array is determined when you create it, and it cannot be changed. Oh no, create. You guys don't know that word? Thanks. It gets better and better each year. Default is initialization values are for int arrays, they're 0, double arrays, 0, Boolean arrays, false, and null for reference or class data types. That's custom classes or strings in terms of what we do. If you know the values you want in an array at the time of creation, you can use an array initializer. Added the curly braces. And to print the contents of an array, we often use a for loop. You could do it with a while loop, but for loop, yeah, it's more work to do it. Yes.
So could you, in an array like initializer, you made a frog array initializer. In that curly brackets, could you define each frog?
You could say new frog, new frog, new
Yeah.
frog, new frog, new frog. Yeah. And then you could have Jerry in there too.
Yeah.
If you already created Jerry somewhere else. Yeah. Yeah.
That's unsolvable.
I mean, if you were going to just do that, you might as well do a for loop. But okay, so I'm going to pause this and we'll do some practice. You'll have time to work on that a little more. So now, the second set of notes we're doing, you've already been doing it. That's the good thing. It's called traversing arrays. Hear my words. When you go through, when you use a loop to go through accessing each element of an array, it's called traversing an array. You know, traversing, mostly in my life before programming, was used if you were crossing a mountain face. Like, we're going to traverse this slope. Say, if you're on a cross-country hike, we will traverse this slope. And you're a nerd, you might say that. That fits my life pretty well. You could use a while loop. Usually we use a for loop for this. So we've done it already. I said last time, but just minutes ago, this is what we were doing. And why do we like to use for loops to traverse arrays?
You don't have to instantiate a new variable. You can just have it all.
Yeah, it's because it's easy. What Quincy said is because you don't have to instantiate a variable and then do all the stuff with the variable. You can just do it all in one line. My answer would have been because we know how many times we want to loop. You know, I mean, that's a shorter way to say it. But yeah, here it is with a for loop, and here it is with a while loop. And yeah, it's easier with a for loop. It's like you have the initialization in one line, and then you print in another line. And it's only 3 lines because we're printing a bunch on one line. Down here with the while loop, you got to declare the variable and set up the while, and then print, and then increment the variable. And yeah, it's a little harder. They both work. Do what you want to do, okay? Why would we traverse an array? Lots of reasons. One reason, to print it. That's what we've been doing so far. Another is to search for a particular value. Like I might say, hey, tell me if anyone in this list of scores got 100%. And then you go through all the scores and see if one of them was 100. To count how many of something occurs in an array, I could say, and I think I do, tell me how many of these numbers are even numbers. So you'd go through the whole array, you'd traverse the whole array and just do a little if. Hey, if this is an even number, boom. I might ask you to traverse an array to change everything in an array. Like what if I said, hey, take this array and everything, I want it all to be uppercase. Then you could go and actually replace what's in each spot with the uppercase version of that thing. Or to calculate, the last example is to calculate something like, hey, take this array, tell me the maximum, the minimum, and the average. And so to do that, you would go through the whole array, add them all up while you're looking for the maximum, the minimum, and the average. Question?
Do arrays have an index of like strings?
No. At least not that we use or that you will use in this class. Yes?
Are arrays the same as lists?
They're not the same as lists. You mean Python lists?
Yeah.
No, because Python lists you can always append to, and arrays you can't. But otherwise, they're very similar.
Are there lists in Java?
They're called array lists, and we're going to learn them next chapter, next unit. So listen, I'm showing you some examples. So everybody look up here. Here's one where we're looking for a particular value. I'm looking for my dog's name, as a matter of fact. So string array called names, and then I put a comment there. Just assume I initialized it with valid data. It could have been a loop with a scanner, and somebody's typing a bunch of words in. And then we go through the whole thing, and we say, hey, if the current one equals Gilly, and we say found a Gilly. It's kind of silly, but here we are going through. We're traversing an array looking for a particular value. This one counts how many times something occurs in an array. To do that, you have to set up a count variable ahead of time. And then, hey, every time the current one equals Gilly, I add 1 to the count. And then I can print how many Gillys I found. Trust me, there's only one Gilly in the world. This one is counting how many of something occur with numbers. So if I wanted to know how many scores there were over 90, I could traverse the array, and inside, hey, if the current score is greater than 90, add 1 to my count, and then I can print out the results at the end. If I want to change every element in an array, I'm changing these all to title case, where the first letter is uppercase and the rest of the letters are lowercase.
Could you have a double in an int array, or but you could have an int in a double.
You could
array?
store an int in a double array. I see like half of you aren't looking up here. It worries me because in a minute you're going to be having to do this, and it's not easy. So to calculate something related to an array, like the total of all the values, the max or the min, you would do something like this. And this is important. I'm showing you how to find the maximum here. You're going to be asked to find the maximum and the minimum of a series of numbers. I'd like to point out that when you're finding the maximum, don't set your max. You have to put something in your maximum variable. Let's look at this code. I create a thing called sum, set it to 0. I create a thing called max, and I set it to the first element in the array. You might think that's cheeky of me or bold to say, hey, I think the maximum might be the first element in the array. But let me be clear. We know the maximum value will be one of the values in the array, right? One of the values will be the biggest number. So you should set it to one of the values, not like 0 or 12 or 100, because unless you know exactly what's in the array, setting it to some fixed value that's hard-coded is a bad move. Like you don't want to do integer.min value or integer.max value. Like if I set the max to 0 thinking, oh, all the numbers are bigger than 0. What if all the numbers were negative? And then if I said, hey, the max was 0, then it would say at the end, hey, the max was 0, which wasn't even true if they were all negative. So anyway, we're setting the maximum variable to score is 0, just as a placeholder. And then here I am adding up all the scores. I'm going through all the scores. I'm adding them all up into sum. And then as a separate thing, I'm saying, hey, if the current one's bigger than my max variable, then I have a new max.
Okay.
Then the first one was the biggest. Yeah, no, we're all good. This is undefeatable. This is a great way to do it. And then for average, notice I do 1.0 times sum divided by scores.length. And that's all in parentheses. So I don't think you'd have to put that in parentheses, but good practice. So you're going to have to do a max and min and an average in the next REPL, and you'll be finishing at home. There is a help video probably already posted, but you should try to do it without the help video. Questions?